Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar introducing Jotform's action buttons. I'm Annabelle, Director of Communications at Jotform, and in today's session, our presenter, Morgan Zions, will be sharing all about Jotform's action buttons, including use cases and a demo of how to get started with each option. Action buttons are designed to maximize the usefulness of Jotform tables by building a bridge to actions that you have previously had to do with other Jotform tools or outside products. You can share information with colleagues, respond to form fillers, and send data points to other tools and platforms. These options maximize your productivity and increase the value you get from storing and managing your data in tables. In today's webinar, Morgan will be starting with examples and use cases, and will then move into a demo to show you how to find and enable each of the buttons. Finally, at the end of today's session, we'll have some time for Q&A with Dennis Callan from our support team. On that note, I'll turn the mic over to Morgan to get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Annabelle. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today. So we've already seen a ton of interest in action buttons since unveiling them a week or so ago. And over a couple hundred have already been incorporated into workflows. I'm very excited to speak to you today to tell you everything that you need to know so that you can get started with these buttons as well. As Annabelle mentioned at the top of the session, we've added these buttons as a way to pull workflows into tables rather than having you leave tables for other Jotform tools or other products, especially for these most common workflow tasks like the ones that you see here on the slide. These are all of the buttons that we've released. The buttons make it easy to edit, share, and connect with the people and processes in people and platforms involved in your processes. In just a few minutes, I'm going to go out into a demo where I will show you action buttons in action, but I want to start by explaining a little bit more about how the buttons work and how they function in context, especially looking at how you might use each of them in a couple of different types of situations. So buttons that you can use for when you're communicating with form users, buttons for working with colleagues, and then those buttons that will help you interact with the other platforms that you're using in your processes. For each of these, I have some real Jotform user examples. And again, when we get out into the demo, I will show you, another example that encompasses a few different action buttons. So let's start with form users. Oops. There are a number of reasons that you may need to communicate with your form users throughout the process. You may need clarification on something. You may be asking them to edit or complete a form, or you may be following up with next steps. The buttons to send an email, send form, send PDF, and request updates make it very easy for you to communicate with your form users. And some of the workflows that we've seen already incorporate these buttons. They're pretty broad, and I think that these are the most used so far, the ones that we have the most examples of so far. The examples that I'll be talking a little bit more about are a teacher accepting homework assignments, order forms, and an interview process. In each of these cases, once the form has been submitted on the form user's end, the form owner is then following up with the next steps of the process using buttons. So we will start with the example of the teacher sending out homework assignments or receiving homework assignments. So the student submits their assignment using Jotform, and then it goes to the teacher. If there are any issues with the assignment, the teacher is using the request update button to ask the student to resubmit. And when everything comes through okay, or if everything was okay from the get-go, the teacher is instead using the send email button to send the students a confirmation that it all went through and a little note of encouragement. These are first graders in this example, so I'm sure the note of encouragement goes a long way there. That example shows a use case where a couple of different buttons are in use. And again, you can use any number of buttons. In fact, most of the examples that I have to talk about do incorporate several different buttons, or at least a couple of different buttons. And you can add however many you need to automate the various parts of whatever your workflow puzzle is. In the example, the interview, for example, an applicant submits their application using Jotform, If the interviewer decides to move them through the process, they're using the send form button to automatically send them a second form where they can sign up for an interview slot. If the interviewer is not moving them forward, they're instead using the send email button to let them know that they're not moving through the process. And we have a number of different examples of shipping processes being pulled or using the action buttons here. In one case, they use a couple of buttons that fall into those other two categories that I'm going to talk about momentarily, but they also use the send PDF button to send a PDF as a receipt or confirmation to the purchaser as part of their process. Combined, these examples show a variety of different ways that action buttons can ease the process of communicating with your form users. In each of these cases, these buttons have shortened and simplified workflows by replacing tasks, again, that would have previously been happening elsewhere. At the very least, the teacher, the shipper, and the interviewer would have likely been moving outside of their data in tables to do other actions in Jotform, but it's also very likely that they were doing this outside of Jotform entirely, so it really pulls the process into one place. So, for example, if the shipper has been sending a PDF as confirmation all along, at the very least, you can design and create that PDF in Jotform, but they would have had to go into Jotform inbox to send it out, or more likely, or just as likely, they were downloading it and then re-uploading it to an external email client to send it off. Because these buttons can be fully customized, some of the buttons that facilitate working with your form users can also be tailored to be used for when you're communicating with colleagues that are also involved in whatever your process is. When we go out into the demo, I will be sure to highlight where you can change your intended recipient for each of the buttons. So it's very clear how you can choose, who you're sending it to, whether it's a user or somebody in your organization or really anybody with an email address. In one example of using the buttons to communicate with colleagues, a health clinic is using action buttons to share patient information after the intake process. So their process is that a patient fills out an intake form using a Jotform. An administrator receives that form and then assigns that patient to the appropriate clinician using the send PDF button, which not just lets the clinician know that they have a new patient, but also shares all of the pertinent intake information that they need. Similarly, you could be using the send email button for the same type of process. So that's why, I didn't update the example here, but I am have included two versions of the button. The send email button can be used in a very similar way to alert colleagues who are in your process that it's their time to step in and do whatever they need to do to move things along. When you're using any of these buttons, whomever it is that you're sending it to, they will receive an email letting them know that there's an action that they need to take. So if there is a follow-up item for them, they can step in and easily find that. And I will show an example of what that looks like a little bit later. So the last section are the buttons that help you work with the other apps or products that you might be used to using as part of your platform, part of your process. You can integrate with other platforms to send files to cloud storage apps, send data to other platforms. And for advanced users, there's also an option to send data outside of Jotform via webhook. So I'm not going to be talking about that one today because it's a little bit outside of the scope of this session. But if that is you're an advanced user and you're interested, we do have a number of resources available for you there. With regards to sending files, that option is going to send a record, an entry to your form to a cloud storage app. When it comes to sending data to other apps, there are a couple of different actions that can happen with regards to your CRM or project management task. So again, this eliminates the need for you to have multiple tabs open and manually transfer data if that's something that you are used to doing as part of your process. In the shipping example that I mentioned earlier, the shipper is also using the send files to send a record of the order to their OneDrive account, as well as the send data button to send to update or add order records to their HubSpot account. Another user, me, is using the send data button to send tasks to Asana directly. So I have a webinar request form where my colleagues can share webinar ideas that they have. And rather than having to open up Asana to start my webinar process separately, I can send these directly to Asana. Certainly made my job easier. Some of this was all possible in Jotform already, but I know I'm not the only person who was doing that manual process with regards to Asana. So, it's definitely saved time and effort on my part. And in addition to that, if you are doing data entry at any point, there's always the risk of making errors, which can sometimes be costly. So it's really cutting back on that risk as well. All right, so with all that background and that information in mind, I'm going to jump out into our demo at this point. And I'm starting here logged into my Jotform account. If you haven't seen the new Jotform look and feel, welcome. We just rolled this out on Monday and we're very excited. I hope you've gotten to check it out already, but if not, I definitely recommend checking it out after our session today. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to be using this Cookies for Koalas one-time donation form. I want to differentiate between that and the ongoing donation form. I am going to talk about that one briefly later, but we're focusing on this form here. And to get started, you want to go into the table for whatever form it is that you're working with. So in this case, I'm going to click the arrow to the left or the checkbox to the left of the Cookies for Koalas donation form and hit that submissions button at the top of the screen there. So that opens up the table for this where you can see all of the donations that have come in so far. I should mention this is an entirely fake charity, though I know it sounds adorable. I wish it were real, but there's not actually any personal data showing here. So this is a record of all of the donations that have come in and the donor information, and you can see, all of that information here. To give a little bit more context, the form itself looks like this. One second here. There we go. So let's say that this is embedded into the Cookies for Koalas website so that anybody who's on their website and wants to donate can easily do so. They would enter their name and their information. They can choose how they're donating. If it's PayPal, this links to PayPal, so that donation can be, can come in right away automatically. Or they can choose to donate by phone or email. And in those two cases, they are instead asked how much they plan to pledge, or their pledged amount, how much they plan to donate. And somebody will follow up either on the charity's end or the donor will follow up. There's information about following up there. They can choose if they'd like a receipt. And if they do, an address field pops up where they would enter their address. And finally, there are a couple of options here at the bottom about making additional types of donations to the charity. So if they are interested, they can make that selection and submit. Now, when I go back to the table, you can see that that entry that I just added is here. So all of what happens in tables automatically happens from your forms. Each row of your table is one form submission, and each column is corresponds to one of the fields on your form. So you see those same fields for name, phone number, email address, etc. You can also add to tables. So it's really meant to be a workspace for you, not just a place that stores your data, but a place that makes it easy to work with the data if you need to. So in this case, I've added in columns where I can confirm the receipt of donations. So once a donation has actually been received, when it's been pledged, we can check this box. We can also confirm the donation amount here. So this really helps with keeping records and keeping track of all of the donations. In addition to that, when I scroll all the way to the right, you can see that I've already added in two columns here with buttons already in place. So my workflow in this case is that people donate to the charity. We receive the donation. If it is a pledged amount, Annabelle steps in and follows up with that person to make sure that we can actually get that pledged amount and get the check or whatever the credit card number is, whatever we need to actually process that donation. So I am using the send email button to send an email to Annabelle asking her to follow up with those folks who have pledged. Also, part of my process is, like in the example that I mentioned of the shipping earlier, is to send a record to my Google Drive account, in this case, using the Send Files button. So I will show you the process of setting up a few other buttons, but for the sake of redundancy and time, I wanted to have a couple already in place. I do want to point out, though, that once you have a button in, if you need to make any changes, if you did something wrong or your process changes, you can click this arrow next to the header here. You have a couple of choices that are consistent across all of the columns that you'd be adding. And when you click Edit Column Preference here, then you'll see where you can change or edit whatever it is that's in that column that's telling the button what to do. So in this case, we can see what kind of email I'm using. In this case, it's a notification email. I can choose to edit this here. If you're using email anywhere in Jotform, this should look familiar. This is identical to the other email edit and email creation options that you have. So in this case, I've included a note to Annabelle at the top asking her to follow up. And then all of the data from that person's donation is included. So there's no need for me to Slack her or email her with the donor's phone number, email address, whatever. It's all right here waiting for her. I can change that email under recipients here. So you can change the sender name, the reply to name, and the recipient's name right here. And, you can add in different types of emails as well. So whatever it is, this is where under recipients is where you would change all of those fields. And in the advanced options, you have a couple of options about, how you're sending attachments, etc. If you are making any changes to your buttons, you want to make sure to hit that save button. Otherwise, you can close it out with the X at the top. And I could do the same thing with my drive button if I wanted to as well. So at this point, I am going to go ahead and add in some new buttons. So we'll go through that process a few different times. If you want to add anything to your table, so the columns in the middle of the sheet that I showed you there as well, you're going to scroll all the way to the right and look for this add button. And when you hit that, you get a menu of options of what you can add to your tables. So for that donation tracking information that I shared, I use that checkbox field as well as a number field. You have all these basic elements here, the very typical, straightforward options. You can also add in a formula column. You can connect to other forms or tables. And your third tab here is where you'll find the buttons. So again, I'm not going to talk about webhook, but that is an option. I'm also not going to show the request update option, but again, once I show you a couple of these, you'll understand how all of them work. They're pretty similar, and just a few minor changes for each one. And again, I've also already added the send email. So that's the one that I just showed you. And that edit also shows you pretty much what you would be doing to set it up in the first place. And send files here is what's sending to my Google Drive account. I wanted to just take a sec to differentiate between send files and send data because I know that was a little bit confusing to me at first. So send files is going to send a record from any form entry. So my entire donation entry there as a PDF to whatever cloud storage app I choose. And send data to other apps is how you would integrate part of your data into another platform that you're using, like a CRM or a project management tool. So I will show the send data in more depth in just a second. I am going to show the send form and send PDF as well. So far I've talked about this process. We receive donations. Annabelle follows up with the folks who've pledged amounts. I send a file to OneDrive, so I have that backed up as my official version of whatever this donation is. I also want to use send form to send that same PDF to the donor so that they have that record as well. Send PDF in that case. Send form, I'm going to use for the folks who want information about making additional or different types of donations to the charity, to send them a form that explains the other donation types and gives them a place where they can start doing that. And in this case, I want to use the send data to other apps to update my records in constant contact for anybody who's donated so that I'm adding new donors and updating any contact information that's coming. So I will start with the send PDF. So whenever you're ready to use one of these buttons, you're just going to click on the button and hit next and then follow the prompts. So first you'll choose the column name. In this case, I'm going to call this send receipt. And this will be, again, the receipt that I send to the donor. Next, I'll be asked to set what PDF I want to send. And in this case, this CFK receipts is a design PDF that I've already designed in Jotform to include all of the pertinent information that I'd like to include. So I'm going to click that. I can enter the email address here. In this case, again, this goes to the donor. So I'm going to pull in their email address from the table, the address that they've already provided. So you do need to be collecting email addresses to be able to do this. But as long as you are, you just select that from the fields drop down here. And here you can include any note you'd like. I'll click to create the column. And now I have a full column full of that send PDF button. So I'm going to go ahead and send this to my Drive account as well as send my PDF off, and we'll get the little confirmation note in just a second. So you can see once that has processed, you get a little note about when it's been sent. And if you do want to resend, you can just click on that and you have a resend option right there. Next, I'm going to add in the send form button. So again, I'm using this to send a new form to folks who've requested more information about ongoing donations. So again, I'll hit, we'll call this auto donate, send auto donate form. I will hit next. Then you'll choose what form you want to send. So in this case, this is where that ongoing donation form comes in. So again, we're currently looking at all of the data from the one-time donation, but I want to send a new form to folks who are interested in making ongoing donations. So I'll click that form and hit next. Again, I'm going to choose the recipient email address. So again, pulling in from the table the information that the donor has provided. Here's the information you requested. I want to point out here that this could be any email address you'd like. So if you do have a process that involves maybe asking a colleague to fill out a second form after a client has, you can certainly use this in that case as well. So I'll create this column and same thing, that pops up. It's right there. I can hit send form and that will go off to the donor to send them more information. Finally, I'm going to add in that send data to other apps button to send this donor information to Constant Contact. And this is a little bit more detailed, which is why I've saved it for last, got the easy ones out of the way first. And the process for this, as well as the send files, is fairly similar. First, you'll need to connect to your outside account, your account on the other platform. You'll have to authenticate it. You'll have to choose where that data goes. And then you're pretty much ready to go from there. So I will select that button, hit next. I'm going to call this send to Constant Contact. I'll hit next here. You can see that my Google Drive account is already linked, but to integrate a new app, I'm going to hit that button. And here's your list, your menu of choices for what you can connect to. So again, for the most part, these are cloud storage apps, CRMs, and project management tools. In this case, I'm going to select Constant Contact. I'm going to choose my account, choose which list I want this data to go to. One sec. Let's try that again. So I will select that, choose my list. There we go. General interest is the list. Map the fields to what data I want to send over and where I want it to go. Hit save. Make sure that I select that the right integration here. So again, I want to make sure Constant Contact is selected. I'll hit create column, and now I have that button as well. So again, this shows you how I've incorporated all of these buttons into tables, but you probably want to know what that looks like after the fact. So, I can show a few of those. For the send to Drive, that's sending to my Google Drive account, and it looks like this. So when I set that up, I needed to tell it where to go, just like in the Constant Contact example I just pointed out. But after that, it's pretty automatic. You get a folder for each that you send over, each file that you send over. So this is the folder for the one that I just sent over. You can see the timestamp here. When I click the folder, here's the PDF that I sent over. So again, this is the PDF that I have created in Jotform. It's pulling in the data that I want to make sure that I capture, that my donors have available to them. And it looks nice, but that can all be edited or changed if you ever need to. And here again, it's backed up, and I have this receipt as a permanent file for me to hold on to. For the send receipt, if I go over into my email, you can see PDF documents have been sent to you. So this is the receipt that the donor receives. It includes that note that I included. This is for your records. And I can see that same PDF here at the bottom. So again, now I, as the donor, have this receipt for my records as well. And similarly with the send a new form, I have sent over the ongoing donation form. Again, it includes that message that I included that will go to anybody you're using, any person that is getting this when you use the button. I can hit view form, and that automatically takes me to the second form that I sent over. So in this case, there's a little bit of information about making an ongoing donation. I can choose how I want to donate on an ongoing basis and how much I want to donate and submit, and it's all set. So very easy. Again, as the person working for the charity, there's no need for me to separately follow up. I can just use that button to do everything. The last thing I wanted to point out is that you may notice that these buttons look different from those two that I already had added. So you also have the option to change the look and feel of your buttons. And you can do that by, again, hitting that arrow. Right under that edit column preferences button or link that I showed is a customized button style link. When you click that, here is where you can change the name of the button. So I've already defined what the columns are called, but for better clarity, I can use this section here to say, call the button what it is, maybe spell receipt right. Probably want to make sure to do that if you're actually doing this. Choose the button color so I can make it that same green color. And you have the option to select from a number of icons here as well. So by default, they all look like this white background with black text and the little paper airplane icon letting you know that it's setting it outside of Jotform. But you can choose anything that you'd like here. Let's say I want to make this a ornament to get a little festive with it. Hit update the style. And now you can see that that button name has been changed, typo and all, and it's ready to go. So this can be really useful. I think, most useful if you do have a number of buttons helping you differentiate between each one so that you're using the appropriate button. But also you can do it just to kind of match your company's look and feel, or just to add a little bit of flair to what you're doing and keep it a little bit fun. So that is the end of the demo. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Annabelle, and she can navigate us and help us get through some of the Q&A. I've seen that a number of questions have already come through. So, I imagine we'll be hearing from Dennis a bit here as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that presentation, Morgan. That was amazing. And yes, we do have quite a few questions, so we'll try to get through these all. So the first question is, can the send form button autofill data from the previous form?
Okay, great question. Hi, everyone. Actually, our development is currently working on that. That has not been implemented yet, but because it's a widely requested feature, we'll be adding that shortly. But right now, it's not possible. We do have the ability to pre-fill form via a plethora of other options like the URL pre-fill, the API, as well as other options. So those are always available, just not with action buttons just yet. We'll be adding that shortly.
Excellent. Thanks, Dennis. Next question is, if we add buttons to existing tables with conditions that already trigger emails, will adding the buttons affect existing conditions? If so, should we edit the conditions or change the form to accommodate action buttons?
Okay, no conditions should be changed at that point. If you already have existing conditions with existing emails, those will all be kept with the with adding the action buttons. When you add a column that's like send email, for example, those emails that have already been created on the form and the associated conditions will be included in that column. So those will be kept intact and they will only be sent out conditionally. You can add any other emails that you would like in that column as well, but the existing conditions will all be obeyed, so there's no need to change anything in your workflows.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, the next question is, I have an event setup form to collect lots of info that I send to a partner. And once they've done their section of the setup, I have an email that I send out to our internal work group to complete our section of the setup. Currently, I export my table and use a mail merge to generate the email as it pulls a bunch of the info, but I could set the send email. But if I could set the send email to just send that email from tables, that would save me a lot of time. Is that possible?
Okay, so from what I understand, the ask here is to send an edit link for a form to be able for the other party to go in and update their portion of the form. So that is definitely possible through either send email column, where you're able to add an edit submission link to the email itself, or through request update column. And that action button will automatically send an edit submission link to the other party for them to go in and add their information to the form.
Excellent. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Next question is, can send form data to a SharePoint online list?
Okay, so that's currently not one of the available integrations. The ones that are available are OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, Slack, Asana, Webhook, Salesforce, Trello, Constant Contact, and a few others, but unfortunately SharePoint list is not one of them currently. Perhaps we'll be adding that in the future though.
Definitely. And then I have many submissions that go onto custom PDF forms. Currently, the only way to see the original PDFs is to download, and they go to my mail as a zip file. Then I have to extract to view the PDFs. Can I just see one original PDF without it going to my email?
Okay, so that I believe is actually outside of the action buttons. This feature has been available in Jotform tables from the very beginning. You can simply select one individual submission and then click on download, and that will export it in that PDF file. Or you can click on the ellipsis menu for the submission and then click on download and select the if you select download as PDF, and if there is an original PDF that's attached to the form, that will become available as the option in the dropdown that will appear.
Excellent.
And just to do that, I've just clicked the checkbox next to the entry that I wanted to download. So you can kind of see it's highlighted. It's a little bit lighter, or it's like a light green color. So then that's how you get to the appropriate one that you want to download.
Perfect. Awesome. Next question is, when you set up an email action button, can the response you sent them be stored in the response column so that data is also captured in the sheet?
So currently that's not possible because the columns are simply not recording the response that is sent. You will be able to see the outline of the email that is sent if you go into the send email column and then edit one of the emails. You will be able to see the template that's being used to populate that response, but the actual response with the data will not be captured just yet. We haven't added that as a functionality.
Got it. And Dennis, is this feature available with enterprise accounts?
So yes, this feature, we have just finished working on updating this for enterprise, and we will be releasing it on all enterprise servers shortly. If you would like it to be enabled a little bit earlier, you can reach out to the enterprise support team and we'll see what we can do to just get you to be the first server to enable this.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you are using your Jotform account for multiple clients, can you have multiple integrations into their specific apps within each form?
So if I understand the question correctly, the ask here is, whether it would be possible to create multiple buttons for different apps. And the answer is yes, simply create multiple action button columns, and then you would be able to create a button to send to Google Drive, to send to Constant Contact, to Asana, and so on and so forth. So you can create multiple columns to send data to each app individually, or you can have as Morgan is showing here.
Excellent. And then with regard to sending a completed PDF or sending form data, is Jotform action buttons HIPAA compliant?
All right. Can we read the question one more time, please?
Sure. Basically, they're just asking if Jotform action buttons is HIPAA compliant.
That's a great question. That's something that I haven't tested on the HIPAA compliant servers just yet, but I imagine that those are HIPAA compliant, in fact.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. We have time for just a couple more questions here. So if we don't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to support@jotform.com, or even, mess around with the table's action buttons and see if you might be able to figure it out too. Okay, so what's the difference between integrating with Google Docs and using the send file button?
Let's see. So I'm assuming that Google Docs, the question is coming in terms of send data as opposed to send files, and I believe those are essentially the same function.
Perfect. Awesome. And then will we get a recording of this presentation? Morgan, do you want to take that one?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we are streaming this to YouTube right now. So if you would like to see this, you missed the beginning of it, it should be available on Jotform's YouTube channel right away. So as soon as we end today, we will also send out a link to everybody who's registered. So if you're here, you will get a link to it in about a week.
Okay, excellent. Well, it looks like we're out of time now. So just want to say thank you everyone for joining today. And it's been a pleasure. Passing the mic back to Morgan.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. Thank you, everybody. Again, we're very excited about this feature, and I hope that you are too. And Annabelle mentioned earlier, but if you have additional questions, support@jotform.com is there to help you out. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next webinar. All right. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.